Hi guys, we are in week 15 and we are still working with newspapers because you guys are going to have to write a newspaper article. So pull up Springboard Activity 3.5 and we're going to look at two articles. Read how the rise of the Daily Me threatens democracy, and then also read The Newspaper is Dying, Hooray for Democracy. All right, so you're going to read those two articles. As you're reading those two articles, I want you to fill out this graphic organizer. So you are going to fill out the graphic organizer with support from each of those articles. So from the How the Rise of the Daily Me Threatens Democracy, you're going to write down times where you see that claim supported, where you see the claim that the newspaper is dying and democracy is dying with it. You're going to write down times in the article that support that claim. And then you're going to do the same thing for the newspaper is dying article. Write down times where it says democracy is dying because the newspaper is going out. All right? Try to get like 3 things from each article that support that claim, that support that the newspaper and democracy are dying. All right? Now, we're going to look at some strategies for refutation. So, when you refute an argument, there are some ways to do that, and these are going to be important when you guys do your embedded assessment. It's also important to look for in other articles that you are reading throughout this newspaper unit, all right? So when somebody tries to refute an argument, there are a few ways to do that. You can attack the claim. So the claim is what basically they're saying. You could just flat out attack their overall claim and say this is not right because whatever. You can attack their reasoning. So if their reasoning is not logical, you can point out where their logic is faulty. So you can point out where if this happens, then that would not necessarily happen, if that's what they're saying. So you kind of refute or attack their chain of events and their logic. You can attack their evidence. So maybe their evidence isn't valid. Maybe they're using evidence from like 10 years ago and it's not valid anymore. Maybe their evidence was recently proved to be inaccurate. So you can attack their evidence that they're using to try to support their claim, or you can attack their assumptions. So this one's usually easy to attack because assumptions you can't really necessarily back up as easily as you can back up like hardcore evidence. So maybe they're just assuming something and you can attack that assumption. All right. So you guys are going to now practice some refutation. So in the announcements and assignments, I've got a graphic organizer from Activity 3.5 where it states a claim. So the first claim is, in the age of technology, the media is still an essential part of a self-governing society. You are going to attack that. You are going to shut that down somehow. You're going to tell me how that is not true. Even if you agree with it, you can make up something that somebody who did disagree with it would say. All right? Then you're going to do that for attacking some reasoning or refuting. I like to say attack, but it's refuting reasoning. You can refute evidence, and then you're going to refute the assumption, all right? So fill in that graphic organizer with your refutations, all right? In Springboard Activity 3.5, it also says you're supposed to do this writing assignment on the pacing guide, but I'm not going to make you do it, okay? All right. Next, in Springboard Activity 3.6, so pull up Springboard Activity 3.6, we're going to look at different types of biases, okay? So there are a few different types of biases. There's bias through selection and omission. So if you're biased about a certain view, if you think one thing and you're biased, you might just select a certain few things to point out to the reader, or you might not, you might omit something. Like maybe you guys have done this to your parents, right? Like you really want to go somewhere and you're just going to omit the part where like all the bad kids are going to be there too. You don't want to tell them that. So you can select specific things or omit other things to make your argument sound better. That's a bias. There's bias through placement. So maybe you're placing some information in a certain point in your article, or you're placing a picture in your article to show some bias. Bias by headline. So the headline itself might be biased. Bias by captions or photos. That also I kind of put with the placement. You can have biased statistics or crowd counts, like maybe the crowd that showed up, maybe you counted the crowd before an event happened, and by the end of the event there was 100 people there, but you said, oh, only 20 people showed up to this event because maybe they counted them like before the event really even got going. So there could be a bias in statistics or counts that way. and then also a bias in source control. So I want you guys, there's a graphic organizer on here. I modified this graphic organizer a little bit. So don't look at the one on Springboard, look at the one that I have in the announcements and in the assignments and fill it out there. So you are going to give me an example of each of those biases, okay? Each of those biases is also, they gave you a longer definition on the Springboard activity. So if you want more explanation, you can look on the Springboard activity for each of those. And then give me an example of each of those. So you're going to give me an example of bias through selection or omission. Okay? Now you're going to read Facebook photo sting Minnesota high school students. Facebook photos sting Minnesota high school students. I read that wrong. So you're going to read that and you're going to answer this question. You're going to evaluate this article as a source of credible information. So you're going to tell me whether or not you think this article is credible. It's like a good source to get your information from. Did you find bias or was it objective? You're going to write 4 sentences telling me whether that article was biased or objective, whether it's credible or not. Because if it's biased, it's not credible. Okay? So answer that in 4 sentences after you read that article. Then, last one, activity 3.7. There is some bias in rhetoric as well. Lots of biases out there. So it says in Springboard Activity 3.7, it goes through all these different biases of rhetoric. So there's rhetoric analogy, there's rhetoric definition, there's innuendo, there's hyperbole, there's true surrogates, there's ridicule. There's tons of different bias of rhetoric, all right? I don't have time to go through them all in this video, but they are all in the Springboard activity. So what you're going to do is with the graphic organizer I've got on the announcements and assignments, you're going to look at all those different slanters in Springboard Activity 3.7, all those different biases of rhetoric, and you're going to paraphrase each one. So basically, you're going to give me the definition in your own words, okay? So look up what labeling is, read it in the Springboard Activity, and then in your own words, write it down, okay? That's pretty easy. Just getting you exposed to some different biases that are out there so you can spot them when you are reading your articles, all right? So in the pacing guide, it says we're going to do Springboard Activity 3.8, but I'm going to excuse you guys from that, okay? What I do want you to do, though, is find your own newspaper article, just like last week, or watch a news story of your choice with the nightly news or the early morning news, whichever, and you're going to fill out this chart. So you're going to tell me the date that this story aired or was printed. You're going to give me the headline or the storyline from the newscast. Tell me the topic. Tell me the target audience, and then give me a significant quote, all right? So I want you guys to go through that, do that, and get back to me next week or get back to me with any questions that you have, and we will keep on working on these news stories, all right? Bye-bye.